Welcome to Sports Management Podcast, where you will hear interesting sports management professionals share their stories, experiences, and passion for the sports management industry. I am your host, Marcus Philipsson. Welcome to a new episode of Sports Management Podcast. Before I introduce today's guest, I would like to give a shout out to another great podcast covering the business of sports. It's called The Jersey Podcast, and the host is Darian Kelly. The Jersey is a podcast that highlights the stories and careers of professionals that sit within the intersection of sports, business, and technology. The purpose of the platform is to encourage sports professionals to find value in their story beyond the playing field. The podcast is available on all major podcast directories, including Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcast. You should also check out his blog, The Jersey Sports Blog. Great content by Darian, so you should definitely check that out. And as always, we are sponsored by InSport Education, the online business school for sport. If you want to take your sports career to the next level or kickstart it, there is no better time than right now. Give yourself or someone you care about a present in the form of education. With the code Sports Management Podcast 10, you get 10% off all of their courses and programs. So head over to their website right now. The link is in the show notes. Today's guest is Amy Wanday, the founder of African Sports Network. Amy is an award-winning entrepreneur, and she founded the African Sports Network in 2018 with a goal to uplift the African sports industry and shape the future of sport in Africa. She has a true passion for sports and education, and she is currently studying sports management in Barcelona. Get ready to learn why Amy values education so highly, about the lack of opportunities for Kenyan athletes, the goal and purpose of the African Sports Network, and much more. Amy Wanday, welcome to the Sports Management Podcast.
Thank you, Marcus, for having me.
How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. And you?
I'm good. I'm in grey November in Gothenburg here, but I think it's a little bit better where you are.
More than a little. It's bright and sunny in Barcelona. Not to make you jealous, but it's fantastic weather out here in November.
I'm very jealous. So you are the founder of the African Sports Network. So can you tell us a little bit about what that is and your role?
Sure. I think I will start off by giving a bit of a background on myself because it connects to what the African Sports Network it is, and it will help just give a little more context. So I grew up as an athlete. I was very passionate about sports. I played many sports across the board, but primarily I was a runner. So I had big dreams in my running career, wanted to go to the Olympics, wanted to progress, obviously. But I was at a point where it's shocking. It may sound shocking, but I didn't know where to go for help. I didn't know, even as a Kenyan runner, I didn't know where to go for help, where to get to the next level in the sport. So, and what I was hearing around me was focus on school, focus on the more formal things. And, this is your running thing is just on the side, but focus on the things that matter is what they kept on saying. So I did just that because I had no one else around me who was interested in it, no one to help me get into that. And it was only a few years later where I moved to an academy that was really, it was called African Leadership Academy, and it was pushing me to follow my passions, which was a point I realized that, okay, I may be studying a different career path to go and be a lawyer or something else, but that's not where my heart is. My heart really is in sport. And from there, they're very much about young Africans making a change. And, they pushed us to make a change on something we're passionate about. And that's when I realized that it was a shame that I wasn't able to pursue sport at a higher level. And I wanted to change that for African youth around me and other people. So that was what pushed the birth of the African Sports Network. It was supposed to be a place that's a mentor, a guidance, support system. It's just that for people who are looking to get into the industry, how do they get in? So our core pillar is education, because we want to educate people of what it takes to get into the industry. And what we do specifically and what we've been doing is hosting workshops. And it has two purposes. One, it's bringing people together, creating a strong network of young Africans or Africans in general who are passionate about sport. But the second thing is educating them and exposing them to opportunities, to mentorship, to guidance. So, for example, in one of the workshops we had on the panel, we had five different professionals in the sports industry in Kenya. So it primarily runs in Kenya, and we had five different professionals. So maybe a sports lawyer, a former footballer, someone who works in sports marketing. And on one side, these five people in the panel, it's also a networking opportunity for them because they all work in the sports industry at a high level, but they've never connected and they have common goals. So that's the first barrier that we broke there, is networking among not only the lower level, but the high level. And then from there, you have all these kids in the panel who are passionate about sports in so many different paths, but they don't know where to go. So they have all these professionals in front of them who have pursued career paths in sport that are saying to them, hey, you can do it because I've done it as well. So that's what it is. And on their side as well as the people who are attending, sitting right next to them is someone just as passionate as them. You know, they're meeting another person their age who wants to study sports management, who wants to be a professional athlete. So it just creates a room of like-minded people, an ecosystem of people who are actually passionate about sports so that you don't feel alone and so that you know where to go for help. So that's what we're trying to do. And that's what we've been trying to do for a couple of years now.
That's fantastic. Is it also like an internship opportunity for this the younger people that they meet the more experienced professionals?
For sure. Actually, first of all, with the African Sports Network, we started off taking interns and employing just young people who are passionate about sports. So, for example, on my current team, the person who handles our media and communication, his first ever opportunity in the sports industry was through the African Sports Network. That's just an example. And now he's working at a high level in sports journalism, you know, but his first professional opportunity was through us. And we have this push and focus on young people because sometimes they don't know how to take that step, or sometimes they just need someone to give them the opportunity to take that step, you know. Someone else on our team actually connected. He's working in law and now is very passionate about sports law. And at one of our workshops, he connected with a sports lawyer, you know. So it's also an opportunity for them to say, hey, what organizations in sport are in Kenya and how can I connect? Because now you're with a person that gives the internships. You're in a room with that person and this person can see the talent right there. So that's what the connection is all about. It's for, if you're lucky enough, maybe someone in the room will give you an internship. And with us ourselves, we are leading by doing, you know, with the people that we bring into the company. It's not established people. For me, it's been about, you know, helping other young people just as passionate as myself have their first step into the sports world.
Talking about the sports industry in Africa, I don't know from the listeners how many people know about it. I don't have a lot of insight. So you said that when you were a runner, you didn't have a lot of support and you didn't know where to go. So can you just explain a little bit about, compared, now you live in Europe, so can you explain a little bit the differences of the sports industry in Africa versus in Europe?
Sure, 100%. It's all about the structure of the society behind sport. This is the huge difference that is so easy to see. So growing up in Kenya and having lived as well in Johannesburg, in a different African city, which is slightly more advanced, and all African countries are different. So even if there's a high level of African sporting excellence, on the continent, a common theme is a professional career paths, engineering, being a doctor, becoming a lawyer. Those are the professional career paths. You know, there's around the footballer world, there's, you know, very bad stereotypes, at least I know in Kenya, or footballers are not educated people, you know. There's so much things where it's like, you know, being an athlete or being someone in the sports industry is not something to look up to. And it's in the systems of our sport. You know, I always say that, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Eliud Kipchoge, who's a world marathon record holder, and he's more of a celebrity in Europe than he is in Kenya. You know, I grew up loving athletics and watching athletics, and I remember seeing some of these athletes walk in the streets in Kenya and no one recognizes them. But for example, if something is your principal sport, you know, when the footballers walk in Barcelona, for example, everyone is around them. There's a celebrity culture around them. And that just goes back to what the society thinks and says of athletes, you know. That really lacked when I was growing up, and still it's developing a bit more, but it's still not the same. And what it goes down for me to is structures. So I'll give an example, not specifically of Europe, but I will take it actually to Australia, because when I was running at a younger age, I did an exchange athletics program in Australia. And the sports was so ingrained in the ecosystem of young people, of education, of school, that I remember being a student athlete there. And first of all, you know, people's parents making time for training during the week. On Saturdays, it was compulsory to spend the whole morning practicing sport. And every single person in the school I was in Australia was the equivalent of my school in Kenya. And at that school, every single person in my class was on a top team for a different sport. There was a girl that was on the national rugby team. There was a girl that was on the national swimming team. There was a girl that was on the national track team. Every single person in the class, super distinct sports, but everyone did something sporty, and that's a huge comparison because they're pushed for it. It's that, hey, okay, if you're not very much into swimming, how about you try touch rugby? If you don't want something physical, don't try rugby, try touch. They really try to ingrain sports into the society as a system, and they made platforms for it. Their parents were supportive of it. The whole culture of the society was around sport, that on a Saturday morning, every single person in class was going to a different part of the city to play their sport. That for me is amazing. And you don't find that in Kenya. You don't find a system of where people are organizing, creating the platforms, the opportunities, and even the infrastructure for people to take part in sports on this higher level. So it's not really in our culture. It's not really in our society. People practice sport, but to be able to succeed as an athlete in Kenya, in other parts of Africa, you really need to push. You really need to have a lot of your own resources in order to make it. There's not just an academy that's waiting for you to take you in, as you find in Spain, for example. You have the tennis academies, you have many structures and systems, but in Africa, a lot of the times you need a lot more resources than the average person. Whereas in places like this, even if you don't have the resources and you've got the talent, there's someone willing to take you in. So I think our society is not, and even just a stereotype and the culture around it is that, hey, like sports is not something you aspire to. You should be in a more formal career path, which in places like Europe, young kids are playing football in the academies from so young because their parents want them to become professional footballers. So that's some of the major differences.
So the structure and the attitude were the biggest one, you would say.
Exactly.
That's surprising. I mean, you mentioned running, and I mean, Kenya is such a strong nation on especially long distance running. So it's surprising to me, at least, that it's not been more structure and that these runners are not like heroes or stars in their home country.
This is something that I've grown up seeing that's been, it's tough for me to watch, being so passionate about it and seeing that. I will commend the growth and where we are today, because there's been a lot of growth. Currently, the structures around the Athletics Kenya and, the organizations are realizing, and they're doing more. We have so much more structures and systems in marketing the athletes and in being more credible. But I always say that, we really just have our talent going for us. If we trained, for example, like the way the Australians were training, plus our talent, I know we're dominating, but we would be amazing. And a perfect example of that is Eliud Kipchoge. As I said, he's a world record marathon holder, and he has his team, which is a whole Dutch team that has provided him all the facilities and structures, right? He was an amazing athlete before this. But when he had this external team come and do the marketing behind him, come and do, support him as a whole athlete, now he's incredible. He's soaring, and this is just, we've had some of athletes before him that were the same level. They were world record holders. But now people are forgetting their names because they didn't have that support structure. They didn't have a team behind them that, had this capacity. But here, for example, once a footballer is like, agents are looking for them, they want to grab them, make sure they build them into a brand. But in athletics, that professionalism behind the sport in Africa in general, it lacks. So that's a huge difference, because maybe these athletes will succeed on a world stage. But what happens afterwards? You guys see them on the world stage. You see them win the gold medals. But what I see is how they go back to their country, and no one has taught them about financial literacy. No one has taught them about anything, and they go back, and in a few years, they don't have anything. And that's the foundation behind what we're trying to do at the African Sports Network. It's a support system, because we believe that everyone trains so much the talent. If you do get the chance to succeed in sport, anyone will focus on, okay, so fine, you've convinced people that you want to play football. Good. But now everyone is going to take you to a football academy and you just play football, and play football. That's it. But for us, we don't bother with the sports side. We want to look at the other side. Who's going to teach you about contracts? Who's going to teach you about financial literacy? Because if you don't have a team behind you, you need to at least know these things on a surface level. And that's what we're trying to kind of give these athletes a bit of insights into. Hey, if an agent approaches you and asks you for money, don't pay them that money. You have so many cases like that in football in Africa, It's about how can you manage your own personal branding. You have tools these days like Instagram where you can grow and be seen on the other side of the world, So we're really trying to help them beyond just playing the sport, because there's so much more you can do. And if you do succeed and you just play the sport, one day it will backfire that you weren't sure how to manage your resources, and now you spent everything you earned, and that's it.
Yeah. You mentioned that the African Sports Network, the networking is important, educational piece is very important. But how do you think that the African Sports Network can impact also the attitude and the structural issues that you mentioned before?
So on this front, my true and core belief is that the more people you can inspire and touch to get into sport and make a positive impact in sport, the more people believe in the power of sport. And this has a ripple effect of impacting the society. So just an example, and I'll always give my personal examples, because for me, everything in sport is something I've lived. It's something I've seen, and it makes me believe even more. Is that I grew up in that background where my parents did say to me that this is not a serious career path. I took it seriously. I challenged that and I took it seriously. And if you speak to them now, they will be the first advocates. If another parent comes to them and says, hey, my child is interested in sport, they will advocate for that, because I've shown and I've proved to them. And now I have people around me as well studying sport. And the more people we have, the more of a community there is around sport, where our parents, our friends can see and be like, oh yeah, you can be successful in sport because Amy is, this other person is. I have a whole list. We're proving, we are creating statistics for people to say that this is a viable career path. And that creates a ripple effect in the society. So for example, around my family, around my friendship group, that's already, small impact is important, That's of course, you want to impact the society as a whole. But for me, I really look at this small impact. I look at from where I am, I have made a change. I have made the change here. And from there's one other person beyond me that's made a change. And then the next person, and that's how it grows. So I impact the 6 people around me. The next person impacts the 6 people around them. And it keeps growing that way. So that's honestly my belief into how we can keep impacting the society.
And talking about the educational piece again, how much opportunities is there at school to study sports? Do they have that even as an option in school to study something, sports management, sports marketing, coaching, etc.?
No. So that's exactly why I ended up in Barcelona. So no, there are some courses. I will always give the example of Kenya because that's my country and what I know best. There are some options of coaching, for example, in Kenya. But for example, in my case, where I wanted to study sports management, I wasn't able to find that option. And this is something I'm very passionate about. And that's why I did say to you before that I'm curious to see where the growth of the African Sports Network is going to go. Because one of the things, I have had a conversation with a high-level university in Kenya on maybe possibly collaborating to bring an executive education course related to sports, and being the first one that does that, because not everyone can travel half across the world to follow their passion. But if we do have a leading university giving an executive educational course, maybe a couple of weeks on management and all the core things that you need to know about sport, that is something that I am trying to put together, because I think it would be amazing to bring all of this sports education into the continent. I do know that South Africa, for example, has a lot to do with fitness, coaching, and more on the technical side. So they produce great coaches and they train that locally. I don't think there's one big name of a sports management, university on the continent. And I would like to see that change so that it's not inaccessible for, the people who are passionate about sport. It's so easy to find someone to study law, engineering, but it's not the same for sports management. And the ripple effect of that is that you see that in all the management positions, you rarely find someone who has a sports management qualification. How can there be a whole ministry of sport and you can't name one person within the ministry? In Kenya, whichever African country, that's actually passed through any formal training of sports management. So if they're managing the sport at a country level, then I think it's important. And the step that we can do towards that is make it even more accessible. We bring it to Kenya and we say, hey, just send your executives to this course. We're not even making it inaccessible and having you travel across the world.
Is the African Sports Network offering any type of online classes or something to spike the interest among the African people?
So we do have tailor-made courses. At the moment, we actually stepped out and changed our offering a little bit. We were offering courses only in this capital city, but we've switched it a little bit. Now we're running courses in a refugee camp, and we're doing it online. We're doing it in a way that's super low cost and super effective. So if a group of people comes to us and says, hey, we need sports education, which is what we're in the refugee camp at the moment, we're working with 14 schools. And in these schools, there's a group that's put them together and they want their coaches trained, and we're able to do that. So for us, and the reason why we're able to do it very easily is the only thing we have to commit is time. We're doing it online on Zoom. We send them a link. They just have to join in, and we make sure that they get the necessary education. So no, we don't have at the moment, as of today, if you check, we don't have a course that you can sign up for. But for example, if these institutions or groups come to us and say that, hey, we have some people that we would like to, to train, we're 100% doing that. And not only, as I mentioned, in the capital city, in places where it's more accessible, but now with all the technology that we have, we're doing it online in different parts of the country.
That's great. And you have a large educational background yourself. So do you value education highly? And do you think that that's important for a career in sports?
Personally, I value education a lot. I'm very passionate about education. Even through working in the sports industry, my focus point is always to kind of educating people, because I believe a lot in the power of education. I've seen a lot of people who have not pursued education formally, and I respect it a lot. I respect their decisions. But I always do think that if these people were given a chance to pursue education, something they were passionate about, they wouldn't be so against education. And I feel like I experienced that a little bit where, thinking of going into a law career path, I was very like, do I really want to study? Do I really like to study? But when I started studying things that I really liked and things that made sense for me in the way that I learn, it changed my mindset. So I was studying a lot of entrepreneurship courses since I was younger. And this is very different because a lot of parts of entrepreneurship are practical. And that's when I learned that I don't hate school. I'm just a practical learner. I don't learn like everyone else in the class. And I discuss this a lot with my close friends who are the opposite of me. They're not practical learners. And I always just think that it's a very different experience depending on who you are. So the reason I've come to love education a lot is because I learned from a young age and I was very aware of the kind of learning that works for me. So when I was going to university, I was very specific about the kind of university I chose. So in the university I studied at, it was a practical school. I didn't write one exam because the school was based on practical learning, which meant that when we learned, at the end of the semester, we're evaluated through presentations, through case studies, and practical things. So it was a business school where you stand up in front of the class and you pitch constantly. That was a skill that I picked up from school, rather than something a bit more, something that I have to write exams. And this was their core model. And that spoke to me. And that's why I'm very happy with education, because I think I look for systems which work for me. And I've had these conversations with some people as well who are against education. They would say they're against education, but if they look more for what their passion is about, then, maybe they end up connecting a bit more. So for me, I really believe in the power of learning. In sports specifically, I pursued a sports management degree. And I was working before I started this degree. I had already established African Sports Network. I had already won awards before pursuing this degree, but I still felt like I needed some formal education and more knowledge. I was, speaking on panels and representing the continent, and I wanted a place to back up my knowledge, to make sure that I'm actually sure. And I'm passionate about the industry, but I wanted to learn so much more to be able to have different opinions, to network as well, and, learn formally. So, and my education isn't over. I want to keep learning and keep growing. I really believe in continuous learning. And every single time I take a new course, there's something new I learn, So I'm someone who really advocates for education. It's just finding what works for you. Not necessarily going for what other people want, but realizing how you learn, what you like to learn, and making the best out of that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that I think that some people say that they don't like school or they don't like education is because they are forced into a path that you say that maybe they are not passionate about. But exactly. Exactly what you said, that if you find your passion and study that, then that's fantastic.
Yes.
You have said that you want to shape the future of sport in Africa. That's a big statement. So if you're looking ahead a few years, what is the goal with the African Sports Network for the upcoming years?
So for the upcoming years, I will not give you an answer because I'm at a very interesting stage where a lot changes. I'm someone who's very open to change. I pivot a lot and I adapt to the ecosystem. So if you look up a lot of the material of when we started, what we do now, it's not super linked to what we did when we started. But the overall goal is to make a strong impact for athletes. And one practical way, at the end of the day, the organization is called African Sports Network. So our goal that I have, whether it comes in the next 2 years, in the next 5 years, in the next 10, 15 years, who knows? But a goal I have is to create this network in a strong way, not only within Kenya, not only within the bordering countries, but a network across Africa. It's something I've been working on. It's something that needs technology. It's something that we have to learn and see how to implement. But my overall goal, which I actually wrote a university thesis about, is creating a digital solution that's a platform for African athletes to expose themselves to. I'm obviously very focused on creating this network, but my other two pillars that you see, one is education that we've spoken a lot about, but the second one is personal branding. It's about, especially the African athletes being able to tell their own stories. So what I do want to build in the future is a platform where athletes can be their own content creators, not a social media platform, but something that's more like a LinkedIn for sports, something that can be a reference point for them, something that if someone across the world sees content about them and says, hey, you have like a sports CV, and they can send this link and all their material is attached, and this is something that should be open continent-wide. A lot of the times I've talked to agents here who say, yeah, the only thing is that when I want African talent, I have to travel all the way there, but we live in such a digital world that this is something that can really be implemented. But at the same time, with building such a platform, I for sure would want to implement aspects of education, making sure that there's a lot of resources and courses available for these athletes. So aspects that will help them grow, maybe a job portal and things like this. But the overall goal is to create this platform that is a hub and a network for African athletes. It's to go digital, it's to expand to the whole of Africa and have something that lives online, that serves these athletes, and also gives them exposure to the rest of the world and advances their careers.
That's very interesting. I think it's a very interesting path to explore. And the digital piece is so important, and everything with the personal branding in sports and NIL now in the United States and so on has just shown how, it's a lot you can leverage there.
For sure. And we're in an age where there's so much we can do with technology. So it's definitely been something on my mind. It's also very obvious that doing something related to technology needs more resources, which is why there has to be a bit. That's why I said I don't know if it's going to happen in the next 2 years, the next 5 years, or the next 10 years, but it is the goal. It is the overall goal.
If we talk a little bit about yourself and your journey, we have touched upon it a little bit. I read that you said that you grew up, you want to be the president. And so from that, child dream up until where you are now, can you just, walk us through your story?
Sure. That's a statement that describes me a lot. I was definitely someone who wanted to make change since I was little, so I always looked at it and I said, yeah, why not? Why could I not be the president? So these are the kind of goals I had when I was growing up. I wanted to do something big. When it was in running, I wanted to go to the Olympics. I thought big all the time. Nothing was too big for me, and I didn't see barriers either. Personally, I was a young girl that was passionate about sport. All the barriers that I came to know were taught by society. But I grew up in a family that's very passionate about motorsport. And, as a young girl, I was like, why can't I ride a motorbike? Why can't I play football? Why can't I do these things? It was more of the reluctance sometimes from my mother or, people around that made me be like, oh, maybe girls don't do that, because I have a brother who's very close to my age. And it was when he's playing football, it was like, okay. When he's riding a motorbike, actually, he competed at motocross and I couldn't, So it was like when he's doing it, it's sure. But when I want to do it, there's a bit of a problem. And that's the first time I kind of saw boundaries, but I realized that I didn't see these boundaries in anything I was doing, whether it was in excellence, I wanted to be at the top. I didn't think that, because I'm female, I can't be the president. I didn't see any boundaries. And from there, I think with my path, as I said, that when I moved on to the Leadership Academy, I really had the mind change of focus. I realized that, of course, it's a great aspiration to want to be the president. But what's more important to me is making a change or an impact in my sector. And that's my focus now. It was a great aspiration to say that, yes, I would love to be the president, but I was a kid dreaming big. But what I realized that I'm super passionate about is the sports industry. And what will make the biggest impact for me is making transformation within the sports industry. And that's what I'm working towards now. I thought of the ways to do this. And for me, I'm very focused on the private sector. I'm very focused on creating something. Also because when looking at, obviously, as a young child, it's easy to say, hey, I want to be the president, but not really looking at all the factors around it. There's a lot of factors around it. There's a lot of very obviously in many systems, in many institutions, there's corruption and a lot of things. And I'm someone who believes in, making change for the people ethically. And when I'm working in a private sector, if something I've created, I don't have any pressure from anyone else to, go in a certain path or any risks or, so it's very easy to focus on the goal and achieve the goal. And that's what I believe. For now, I'm working towards that. I'm taking a little step every single day towards achieving that goal. And the most important thing is that I believe that everything I've done has helped me build my credibility towards where I am today. So from that young girl saying that, she wants to be the president and finding my pathway in sport, it's easier to find something to focus in. I'm not sure what I would have done in order to become the president, but along the way, I found my passion in sport. I was able to create my enterprise. And through that enterprise, I was able to work hard. And now I've gained a lot of credibility. I did that at quite a young age where I hadn't had a job before. I didn't have a university degree, but I was able to get accepted into university because I had that credibility behind me. And now I've moved over to Barcelona, I was studying here. And now I'm working with a startup, which I was able to get that credibility through my degree and the fact that I set up the African Sports Network. So for me, all of the things are connected. It's from realizing my passion that's been able to get me to where I am today. So this is the journey that I'm on. This is the continuous growth. I believe that I'm still impacting people. I keep, regardless of what I'm doing, even when I'm a student, even when I'm working here, I'm keeping the African Sports Network going because this for me is something I'm passionate about and I always want to make that impact. And it's something that I do want to grow in the right time, but I'm definitely still aspiring for big things. And at the moment, working, learning and gaining the credibility I need to keep growing and keep being better every day.
Yeah, it's undeniable that you have accomplished so much at a short period of time. As you said, you started the African Sports Network and you have done a TEDx talk and all of your, degrees and so on. What I found very interesting from what you said now, you said with your brother that he could ride like motocross and you couldn't because you're a girl. In Europe and the US, the sports industry is very male dominated. I would assume that it's similar in Kenya and in the rest of Africa as well.
Yes, it is.
So how has that been for you to, create all of this network and had this success and had this impact as a minority in the industry?
So as you can imagine, if you ask me the question, what has been your biggest challenge? That's probably one of this. It's a two-part answer. It's the gender and age. I haven't worked in Kenya directly for quite some years now, but when I did, I was still very young. I still am very young, but at that point, I was even younger. And this tends to be hard because if you look at the people who lead clubs and federations, this is around the world, I think, not only in Africa, there's a certain age group. It's a age group that's very much older, So for this young person, number one, to step into your rooms and start, in advocating for change. And then this young female, because a lot of these federations in the committee, you will find only one gender. So this young girl walks into this room and is trying to make change. No one's going to take you seriously. And actually, that is the honest reason of why I work in the private sector. That is the honest reason, because when I started, I tried to collaborate. I tried to go into rooms. I tried to go to ministry in sports in Kenya. I went everywhere. I tried to find people to work with me, to help me, but no one did. And from this, I said, okay, it's good because it pressures me. I needed to build something that was sustainable, even if no one was helping us. It's a social enterprise. So I didn't build it to something that was supposed to be profitable, but I did learn the model of having to be able to have something that breaks even, because if someone doesn't come and give us money, we still need to be able to do things. So, but going back to the specific challenges, as a woman in sport, for example, in my sports management degree, I was always one of the only girls in the room. You have to know 10 times more than your counterparts, because it's always assumed that, hey, what do you know? I did have an interview once on national TV in Kenya, and I looked at the comments after they posted the clip on social media, and it was like, yeah, what does this girl know about sport? So that's generally, it's an attitude in lots of places, but it's the same in Kenya, it's the same in Africa, where it's not really a place where it seems like you belong. Luckily, at the moment, there's so many exceptional women in the sports industry in Africa, not only in Kenya. And this is a network that's been created of women who are supporting each other and women who are excelling in sport. So I believe now is better than 5-10 years ago, where there was not very many women. But now there's a huge presence of amazing women doing amazing things. And it's amazing for someone to look up and see these women, because it's like, you know what, I do fit in here. The challenges I mentioned, for example, when I was growing up, it was very tough, because it's like, okay, I see myself there, but I don't see anyone else there. So maybe this is not the place for me, In university as well, it was, okay, 10 years ago, I would have been the only girl in this room, but now we're three girls. And that makes a difference, you know? So there sometimes, I mean, I think now it's a lot better. There's a lot more growth. It's the same, it's a male dominated industry and we can't compete with that. But at the same time, there's so many women's football summits and different things happening now that are trying to connect and empower women in sport, not to give up, to discuss the challenges and collaborate and help each other, you know? And I will always advocate for the young people as well, because they're the people who sometimes are neglected. And I keep saying that in this digital age, they're everything you need. They're the ones, you have people at this different age leading the federations, and you know they're not very savvy with technology. It's a different age group, you know. But these young people bring in a whole new digital perspective, and I think I've seen some of the Olympic team in Kenya has adapted to that, has gotten young people, and they're doing so much better on social media. So I think right now it's a good time. It's a good time. Things are changing and things are positive. But I will admit that when I was younger, it was really hard to have anyone to look up to. But as I've grown up, I have so many amazing women that are like mentors to me in the sports industry. And, you know, if I have a challenge, I'm able to speak with them and they're able to help me grow.
And imagine now what a role model you might be for, I mean, up and coming people with aspirations to work in sport, and then see that you did so well, and they see that there are young women in the industry as well. And that might inspire more people to make a similar journey.
It's one of the things that really keeps me going. It's one of the things that whenever I think, you know, things are tough now, or, you know, or anything, it's really one of the things that pushes me and motivates me. Anytime I get a message, I try to talk about what I do, which is a very tough thing. I was never really the person a few years ago that had a strong social media presence, but I do try to talk about what I do, not because I want to, but because every time I did, someone messaged me and said, hey, I need help with this. Do you know how I can help? So I'm actually trying to build myself and have a brand presence available so that I can be a resource for people. Because it's amazing sometimes the messages I receive of people who just want help, people who just need guidance. And this is the reason why I do what I do. I would love to help. So I really am trying to put myself in a position where I would have died to see another person that was succeeding as when I was young and trying to get into sports. So I'm trying to position myself in a way that someone who's a bit confused and is a bit like, okay, I want to get in sports, but I don't know how. I hope that I can be accessible for them, and I will always do what I can. I always respond to messages, always get in touch so that I can help someone else kind of have that pathway. And sometimes just a conversation really helps. There's been people who have picked up the phone and talked to me, and it's made the difference for me. So I'm trying to do the same for others.
On that topic, what would be your best advice for young people who wants to enter the sports industry?
Number one is to dream big. I think it sounds very cliche, but really, I think it's a very important thing, but two parts. It's dreaming big, but knowing what you want. I think the difference between when I was younger and now is that I always dreamed big. For sure, I always dreamed big. But as I said before, I wanted to be the president, and how on earth was I going to get there? Zero action plan, right? But I learned the purpose of focusing. So when I had big dreams, I at least had some focus and I knew where to focus. And this has really helped me being able to like map a path for myself, because I'm not just saying something aspirational or saying something that sounds big, because at the end of the day, I wanted to make a change. So it wasn't something thought through. I said, I want to make a change. Okay, I want to be the president. But actually, when I think of what personal change I want to make, being the president is not very useful, but being someone leading in the sports sector is very much more useful for that, you know? So taking this moment to not really look at what it is that society says is the thing to be. For example, oh, I want to be an influencer because everyone's an influencer. But what do you want? And then go to the how can I make that happen, you know? So I think really thinking about that. And the second most important thing to me has been the power of mentorship. That's one thing I'm very grateful for, is that I was always open to receiving help. And right now, because of my mentors, I'm where I am today. But actually, I will take the first two. I'm not going to take them back, but I will put them in second and third, because I have one that's, I think, the top one advice, which I think is the one that helps the most. And it's, for me, what I would describe as the importance of being present. This is every room I showed up in, I showed up ready and deliberate. And I think the other two things are an impact of this first one. I connected with my mentor because when I was sitting in front of, he was a guest speaker in my class, in one of my university classes. And I showed up to university that day, not knowing that he was going to be in that room, but I showed up as my usual self, ready, focused, and when he spoke, I was taking notes, asking questions, and he looked across to my professor and said, "That girl seems very interested in this course. Tell her if she needs any help to get in touch with me." And I wasn't doing anything different that day, but every time I showed up in class, I showed up ready. I was there to learn, and I showed that in my attitude. And people pick up on that, and people want to help. And I think in the rooms and the spaces that I go to, this is a theme: is that I'm not there for the sake of being there. I'm present, I'm ready, and I'm deliberate. And I think it's a very important thing to, when you're doing something, do it well and do it deliberately. And people are more inclined to want to help you and help you grow and help you succeed because they can see that you're passionate and you're putting in the work to be there. So this is something I said always, the importance of being present, because there were people in that classroom that were at the back, sitting, just not taking it very seriously. But he noticed this person that was at the front that was asking many questions and genuinely seemed like they want the answer to these questions. And I had a conversation with him afterwards that he said this. And that's when it struck me that it's very important that even when you don't know people are paying attention, they are paying attention. It's very important to always show up as your best self because it can open doors for you that you can't imagine.
Yeah, that's great and very motivational. I hope that the listeners takes notes.
I hope so.
Yeah, one question I will always ask is if you have any bumps on the road in your career, but I felt like you answered that a little bit. I don't know if you have any other example you would like to share.
I think the more formal bump, yes, I did share of, it's a more cliche answer, but I think the smaller things, and I'll be very transparent, is that the smaller things for me as someone who started something at a very young age, I'll call them bumps, but it's a lot of decision making, it's at that point of, being successful in what you're doing, but having to not put that on pause, but really step aside from that and go and pursue your education. And the second part from that was graduating and then making a decision to actually stay in a sector stay in Barcelona, which is way more advanced in sport. And this was I graduated right when the pandemic we were just coming out of the pandemic. A lot of the economy, the sports sector in Kenya was down, and a lot of changes had happened, basically, So I can say a bump, but it's not a bump, it's now something positive, is that I had to make tough decisions. I always have to make tough decisions. I was sure that I came to Barcelona just to pursue this degree, and, I was going to go back right after and continue what I was doing. But I was in spaces that challenged me to think about that. And I ended up making a different decision from what people expect. That comes with criticism. How can you be a founder, but you're not a full-time founder? How can you be running the company, but you're not running it full-time? But I take that decision knowing my capabilities. I don't think I've let anything down since. I have a team in Kenya that's fully capable. I've been able to keep things running as I committed to doing because I'm someone who, when I commit to something, I get it done. But it comes with criticism, and I think that's a bump. But being able to be secure in myself and secure in making a plan has helped. But I can say that that's a point, for example, for me, that wasn't easy. It's making a decision. Hey, should I stay? And, for me, I personally believe that what I'm doing is very important because I'm learning from people who worked 25 years at Nike. This is experience I couldn't get anywhere else, So I do believe that it's something positive, but sometimes the bumps are society, decision-making, and things like that, different things that you don't expect. It's not a smooth journey always, I think.
No, for sure. And another cliche is that winners focus on winning and losers focus on winners. And as you said, there will always be criticism, and it might be based off jealousy or just, they don't know any better, but there will always be criticism. But as you say, that you can turn that into something, as fuel as well.
For sure, because not everyone's path is the same, It's very easy. And that's one thing that I really had to be sure on. And that's why I keep insisting that, even just in having ambition and saying you want to be the president or whatever, it's very important to look at you as an individual. And I think I take this is something I carry in everything that I do. Because as I said, when I was young, I knew that I wanted to ride a motorbike, but someone else said that, hey, you can't. If I just listened to that, then I would doubt my capabilities. And sometimes you really have to pay attention to you always have to listen to feedback because it's important. I take mentorship and guidance so heavily because it's very important. But at the same time, sometimes you can challenge it. You do need to know your capabilities, and you also need to ask questions and understand why. Sometimes people say, "Oh, don't do that," But if you look at the reason why, for example, I'll be very transparent about my case. I'm 23 years old. I had never had a job before I started working on the African Sports Network. And obviously, when I'm in entrepreneurship groups with other founders, there's a whole thing of, but a founder has to be working full-time on their project. However, these founders, usually are double my age, are people who have worked many jobs and now have decided to become entrepreneurs. And they have experience, they've done everything else. Whereas in my case, I didn't have the experience of having a manager before now. I didn't have many things. So if we look generally, it should be like, but if you're working on an enterprise, you need to be full-time. But on my personal case and my personal journey of growth and development, it is valuable for me how can I be a good leader when I haven't even had someone manage me, So I had to look at that specifically, and it's like, okay, these founders are going to say that you do need to be full-time. It's very important. But in my case, I still have time to take to learn and then grow to that point, So I think it's just the importance of challenging what is heard around. Sometimes people will be right. Sometimes the people guiding you, it's important to listen to feedback. I trust a lot my parents, the people, my mentors, and everyone around me. And at the end of the day, they did agree that, hey, you do need to learn. It's a very important thing. But if I only listen to the entrepreneurs who are saying, hey, you have to be full-time, then I wouldn't be in this valuable position that I am now.
For sure. Approaching the end here, is there something that I haven't asked you yet that you would like to mention?
I don't think so. I think we've gone 360 back and around, and I think everything that I would like to share with the viewers and even more has been covered. So I'm very happy with that.
I'm glad. Then the last question that I ask everyone is, if you could choose the next guest on this podcast, who do you think that I should talk to?
I may not give you a name, but I would like to give you a demographic. I would like you to focus on someone in African sport and a woman in African sport. I think would be a great platform. I think there's a lot of amazing African women doing amazing in sport. So it would be nice to have another one of them. I know some in law, some in marketing. So it would be great to speak to them. And they have years of experience, years of expertise. They're wonderful women. So I think if more people can hear what African women are doing in sport, it would be incredible.
Definitely. I would be very happy to get some names from you offline.
For sure.
Amy, Wanday, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the Sports Management Podcast.
Thank you so much. I hope I helped. And if anyone needs any follow-up, any questions, anything, you can definitely search my name on LinkedIn, on any social media platform. And I'm really happy to get in touch and answer any questions.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Sports Management Podcast. Please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any upcoming episodes. Also, feel free to leave a comment about what you thought about this episode. If you want to get in contact with me, send an email to sportsmpodcast@gmail.com or hit me up on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram @sportsmpodcast.